Through the scope, the man saw a snow-white deer. He did not pull the trigger, because he realized the deer seemed almost humanly aware. He tried to approach slowly, and the deer indeed looked back at him with curiosity. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out and the white deer collapsed. Stunned, the man stared at the scene, and before he could react, another man with a gun stepped out of the woods. He recognized him. It was Matt, the arrogant son of a wealthy townsman. Matt ignored Jimny's obvious shock and didn't care that his bullet could easily have struck Jimny instead. He was lost in the thrill of hitting his prey. Furious at Matt's reckless behavior, Jimny finally snapped and struck him unconscious with the butt of his rifle. Matt fell into the snow, knocked out but not dead. He would wake up sooner or later. Everyone knew his father was powerful and rich, but Jimny felt no fear. Instead, he stepped forward, took Matt's knife, and expertly slit the deer's throat, letting its blood spill onto Matt's own to mix the traces. Having once worked as a forensic doctor, Jimny knew exactly why this was necessary. Then he hauled Matt's unconscious body into the vehicle, preparing to move him. Who would have thought that halfway down the road Jimny was stopped by the police? He discreetly hid the knife by the passenger seat, then obediently stepped out of the car for inspection, but during the process he suddenly turned the tables. What happened next was dull and lengthy, so let's skip it. It turned out that the policewoman, Angela, was Jimny's girlfriend, which explained how he managed to escape unscathed. Back at home, Jimny lined the walls and floor of his room with plastic sheets, moving with practiced precision. He then secured Matt tightly onto a table. When Matt woke up, not knowing what had happened, he still tried to threaten Jimny into letting him go.
You shot my deer! And you almost killed me!
Matt realized the man before him might be a lunatic, and in order to save his life, he quickly apologized, hoping Jimny would spare him. But Jimny brought up a rumor from town that during a boat race, Matt had deliberately rammed into another team, killing 5 people, and because of lack of evidence, the police never launched an investigation. Under Jimny's threats, Matt confessed, and with that, he had already met Jimny's standard for execution. Jimny demanded that Matt confess to all his crimes. Panicked and incoherent, Matt began spilling everything, admitting he had been doing evil since the age of 7. Without hesitation, Jimny drove a blade straight into his heart. Just as Jimny was about to dismember the body and erase all traces, someone suddenly entered the house. Holding his axe, Jimny walked over, only to find it was his biological son Harrison, whom he had never met before. Harrison said he had left the orphanage and came all this way just to meet the only family he had in the world. Jimny thought to himself, this was the worst possible timing. The two sat facing each other in silence, the atmosphere heavy and awkward, until Jimny finally decided to settle his son first before dealing with Matt's corpse. The next morning, as he was scrubbing away the bloodstains at his doorstep, police sirens suddenly wailed and a convoy of squad cars pulled up in front of his house. Jimny froze. Could the police have already discovered Matt's murder? Just then his girlfriend arrived to explain that old Matt's son had gone missing on a hunting trip, and since the location was close to Jimny's home, the officers planned to set up camp there. Jimny had no choice but to agree, though he was far from ready. At that moment, Harrison stepped out of the house, prompting his girlfriend to ask in suspicion who he was. Jimny's heart tightened, unsure how to answer, but Harrison quickly explained that he was Jimny's son, carefully avoiding mentioning Jimny's real name, Dexter. Relieved that his true identity was not exposed, Jimny forced himself to remain cautious. To maintain appearances, he volunteered to take his son along to help with the search for Matt. In reality, he used a snowmobile to erase the blood traces left from the night before, then staged the discovery of the white deer as though they had stumbled upon it by accident. He sent his son back to inform the police while he tried to carefully retrace the details of last night's crime. He picked up the stone Matt's head had struck, wiped off the blood, and tossed it far away. Then he took Matt's gloves and left them by the highway, staging the scene to make it look as if Matt had killed the white deer and fled in fear of the consequences. When he returned, he saw a group of hunters gathered around the deer, discussing it heatedly. Jimny felt a surge of satisfaction, knowing the crime scene was being further contaminated. Soon the police arrived, and the hunters immediately pointed the finger at Matt, saying such a cruel act could only have been his and urging a full investigation. Seizing the moment, Jimny mentioned that a few days earlier, Matt had bought a hunting rifle from the place where he worked, deliberately steering the police toward conducting a ballistic test on the bullet inside the deer's body. As expected, his words had exactly the effect he intended. The next day, while the police were still out searching, they received a call from the station confirming that the bullet in the white deer's body had indeed come from the rifle Matt had purchased. This sealed the case as Matt fleeing out of guilt, and the search was called off. But when they returned to camp, old Matt erupted in fury. Standing over his son's corpse, he insisted that his boy would never run away, that he must still be somewhere in the forest, and that he had already activated his connections to find proof. He demanded that the police resume their search immediately, though they ignored him. Yet the following day, old Matt actually managed to obtain surveillance footage from the forest, forcing Jimmy to be summoned to the station. The moment he learned about the footage, a chill ran through Jimny's heart. Was this really how it would all end, inside this police station? Nervously, he waited as the officers switched on the monitor, but relief washed over him when he saw it was only thermal imaging. The video showed two figures in the woods, but not clearly enough to identify one of them as Jimny. Still, this gave old Matt another excuse to explode, accusing the police of incompetence. Pressured by his outrage, the authorities brought in the region's top case analyst. True to his reputation, the analyst didn't even need advanced tools. Just by swirling a test tube of the remaining blood, he confirmed that the deer's blood contained traces of human blood, and then began reconstructing the sequence of events.
Attacker knocked him down. The victim then fell backwards, hitting his head right about. There was a rock here.
Every detail of the reconstruction was spot on, and within minutes the analyst had flawlessly recreated the crime scene, leaving Jimny deeply unsettled as he watched. That night, his girlfriend revealed that the police planned to send in search dogs the next day. Acting quickly, Jimny dug up Matt's body under the cover of darkness and dragged Matt's coat haphazardly through the snow to scatter the scent. By morning, his trick worked perfectly. The dogs ran tirelessly through the forest but only circled around in confusion, wasting hours without finding anything. Taking advantage of this distraction, Jimny began searching for a new place to hide Matt's body. He discovered an abandoned mine that seemed ideal, but his plan was abruptly ruined when a black bear appeared, forcing him to flee for his life. Shaken and out of ideas, he felt cornered until his son inadvertently gave him a solution. Harrison asked his father to help transport the deer's corpse with the pickup truck so they could cremate it. Jimny agreed at once, and that night father and son drove out together to a remote factory. Harrison thought they were only burning the white deer, but in truth Matt's body was consumed in the flames as well. On the way back, Jimny spotted old Matt drinking happily and, curious, went over to ask what was going on. To his shock, old Matt claimed his son hadn't gone missing at all. He had gone to New York and had just video called him moments ago. This left Jimny even more bewildered. If Matt wasn't dead, then whose body had he just burned? The next day, old Matt personally visited the police station to tell them his son was staying at a hotel in New York and that they could stop searching. Jimny grew increasingly uneasy. What game was this old man playing? The truth was, old Matt's behavior was indeed bizarre. Just 3 days earlier, a young girl had come into his restaurant, asking if she could wash dishes to save money for her journey home. Not only did old Matt agree, but he also offered her free lodging. Seeing the spotless, cozy room with a soft bed, the girl felt grateful, remarking that there were still good people in the world. But then a thought struck her and suspicion crept in. She turned to old Matt and asked,
"What do you want from me?"
I just ask humbly that you pay it forward.
The girl settled in, thinking she was safe, but soon realized she could never leave. She discovered the surveillance cameras and, no matter what she tried, the door wouldn't open. Yet after 3 days, instead of panicking, she shocked everyone by suddenly performing a bold act, stripping in front of the camera with a provocative gaze, nearly causing old Matt on the other side to drop his computer. The aged old Matt had long lost interest in such displays. What excited him was the fear of his prey. Disappointed, he pressed a button and the door finally unlocked. Speaking through the intercom, he told the girl to put her clothes back on and get out, while he donned a hood and gloves and moved toward the door. He warned her to run, saying he would shoot on the count of 10, but the girl's thinking worked differently. After hesitating, she ran straight toward old Matt, who pulled the trigger and then repeatedly smacked his own head in frustration, clearly enraged by this failed hunting experience. Old Matt decided to regain his thrill from a different victim. That night, fully dressed and prepared again, he pressed the switch for another room, instantly unlocking the door. The woman inside didn't hesitate. This was her only chance. She bolted outside, finally pushing through a heavy iron door, realizing she had been trapped in a basement all these days. Without looking back, she ran frantically through the snow. But old Matt had been waiting, infrared sight activated, bullets loaded. He had committed crimes for 20 years without ever being caught, though recently, his son's situation had raised police suspicions. A true crime blogger, May, approached Angela, hoping to follow the task force to gather material for writing. Angela agreed, and perceptive May quickly sensed something unusual about old Matt. One day he insisted Matt was in the forest, the next day he suddenly claimed Matt was in New York. Clearly, something was off. So they went to the hotel old Matt had mentioned, only to discover that the registration wasn't under Matt's name at all, but someone else with the same name. Later, when Angela visited the local sheriff, she learned a shocking piece of information. The sheriff said the case reminded him of an excellent forensic specialist, unfortunately deceased, who had a son. He paused to recall the name and finally said, Harrison. His son had once been given 3 consecutive pills at a party. If a female classmate hadn't reported it in time, Harrison might have died young. As a father, Jimmy could never forgive that. He tracked down the identity of the drug dealer who produced the pills through Officer John, and soon located the dealer's residence. Equipped with his tools, Jimny's practiced movements revealed his hidden identity as a serial killer in hiding. He moved with fluid precision, and before the dealer even understood what was happening, he was dead. By the time the police arrived, the suspect had just been killed, and the scene was already meticulously cleaned. John could never have imagined that simply revealing the dealer's name to Jimny would lead to such immediate consequences. Yet Jimny's girlfriend, Angela, intercepted his car with a fierce determination.
License and registration.
Yes, mistress. Officer, sorry.
Not that one. The one for Dexter Morgan.
A person living under a false identity for years must have dark secrets. Yet from Jimny's words, Angela only heard about his misfortunes and never suspected that he was the infamous Miami butcher. Still, deceiving his girlfriend for over a decade was unforgivable. After a huge argument, they parted ways amicably, but Jimny knew that exposure of his killer identity was imminent. Deep in thought, he realized that May's arrival had already put him at risk. He checked into her background and discovered she was a skilled true crime blogger. Then he saw May chatting happily with old Matt. Feeling uneasy, Jimny feared that if they connected the dots, old Matt might suspect him. So he sat quietly nearby, waiting until they left. Only then did he approach the bar and unplug a charging phone. He had deliberately left it there earlier to secretly record their conversation. Listening in, he learned that May had been investigating Matt's disappearance. Old Matt mentioned that Matt had returned home and offered to take May there for a personal interview. His words piqued May's curiosity, and Jimny couldn't resist following. He wanted to see how Matt, whom he had cremated, would handle an interview. The audacity of this old man, bringing a reporter to interview his supposedly dead son, was staggering. At first, the reporter believed him, but upon being led to a remote, eerie basement, she instinctively grew wary, her right hand tightening around the self-defense device in her bag. Suddenly, the front door swung open, and the female reporter nervously turned around, only to see Jimny. Jimny explained that he had just come in out of curiosity. Old Matt tried to hide his irritation. His plan for murder had now turned into a mere performance. He walked to the door, called out Matt's name, and knocked a few times. Seeing no response, he assumed Matt had gone out and was about to leave with the two of them. Unexpectedly, Jimny made a swift move and opened the door. He immediately saw through the room's trickery. The door was locked from the outside, the room was under surveillance, and of course, Matt couldn't possibly be inside. Old Matt hurriedly came up to send them away, and seeing his prey slip through his fingers while his secret was exposed, he was so furious that he struck the wall. Realizing that old Matt was likely the culprit the police had been hunting, the mastermind behind the missing girl case, Jimny wondered whether he should investigate further to expose him. He hadn't made up his mind yet, as his own situation was precarious, but what happened next changed his attitude. He went to the gym to watch his son Harrison's wrestling match and was shocked to discover that old Matt was actually the assistant coach of the wrestling team, constantly motivating Harrison before he went on the mat. Once the match began, Harrison immediately gained the upper hand and quickly defeated his opponent, but he didn't stop there. He violently broke his opponent's arm. Chaos erupted in the arena, yet old Matt not only failed to reprimand Harrison but even praised him. Seeing this, Jimny instantly flew into a rage. If it weren't for John, the police officer acting as the referee, holding him back, he would have gone straight up to attack old Matt. Because he had just come to a sudden realization, ever since the night Matt was cremated and he encountered old Matt had been actively seeking frequent contact with him, even giving Harrison a drone and helping him find part-time jobs. Now it became clear that old Matt wasn't trying to get close to Jimny, but was attempting to influence Harrison. Could this be his revenge against Jimny? The reason being that he had already suspected Jimny was the one who killed Matt. Given Jimny's nature, old Matt would have to die next. However, at that moment, Angela called with news of a new discovery. The police had found a female corpse in a mine, preliminarily identified as having been discarded there for 25 years, and the victim turned out to be Angela's best friend. Grief-stricken, Angela hoped that Jimmy, Miami's top forensic expert, would assist in the investigation. Jimmy discovered that the victim had been shot in the back, which was likely the cause of death. He also found traces of skin tissue on the victim's teeth, suggesting she had bitten the killer before dying. However, given how long ago the crime occurred, the chances of extracting complete DNA were slim, and the tiny amount available couldn't be used for large-scale comparison. Angela, however, said that they only needed to compare it with one person, Old Matt. It turned out that the last time the police planned to search the mine for Matt, Old Matt had hurriedly claimed he had found his son, effectively stopping the search. But after verifying in New York that Old Matt had lied, the police suspected the mine might hold some dark secret of his, perhaps even Matt's body, and the outcome was completely unexpected. Since DNA comparison would take some time, Jimmy took Angela to Old Matt's underground lodge. However, upon entering, they discovered that Old Matt had long since cleared out the place, leaving them with nothing. Fortunately, the DNA comparison results had come back, and the police arrested Old Matt on charges of murder. In the interrogation room, the police presented the evidence. The skin tissue found on the victim's teeth matched Old Matt's DNA almost perfectly. After reviewing the evidence, Old Matt calmly requested to see his lawyer first. In fact, he had already set a plan in motion. His employee Jason had handed an envelope to Harrison to give to Jimmy. When Jimmy opened it, he found only a steel nail with a number etched on it, leaving him utterly puzzled. That night, he went straight to the police station to ask Old Matt what it meant. With a meaningful look, Old Matt said,
Hey, Jim, you remember that night that you picked me up in front of the tavern and gave me a ride home? It was snowing, right? Funny thing was, when I got home, it wasn't snow on my jacket. It was ash. You think you know everything. But I know one thing you don't. Titanium doesn't melt.
Fascinating. Thanks for the science lesson.
After leaving the police station, Jimmy did his homework thoroughly. First, he realized that the object was a titanium screw used by orthopedic surgeons in surgeries. Second, Matt's foot had previously been fractured and surgically treated, a fact Jimmy himself had no idea about, and had assumed that simply burning the body would cover everything up. In reality, Old Matt had long known that Jimmy was the one who killed Matt. More importantly, after consulting with his lawyer, Old Matt was confident he could secure a not guilty verdict. He confessed to the police the circumstances of the girl's death. 25 years ago, one night, a girl had a huge argument with her parents and ran away from home. At that moment, Old Matt, driving a large truck, happened to pass by and stopped to give her a ride. After learning about the girl's situation, Old Matt tried to reason with her, insisting on taking her home. Unexpectedly, the girl resisted fiercely, even attempting to open the door and jump from the truck. Old Matt reached out to stop her and was bitten hard. The truck was forced to stop, and the girl ran off at full speed. Old Matt then pulled out a gun and fired, and the girl fell. Of course, this was all the version in Old Matt's mind. When recounting the story to the police, he replaced himself with his father. He had merely been riding with his father at the time and had witnessed everything from the side. By exploiting the high DNA similarity between father and son, he created a scenario where there was no way to directly link him to the crime. Although unfortunate, the evidence was insufficient, and Angela had no choice but to release Old Matt. The screw was made of titanium alloy, which fire couldn't melt. This was a disaster. After calming down, Jimmy realized that 4 screws were inserted at a time, so 3 must still be hidden somewhere. If he could just retrieve and dispose of them, everything would be fine. But after searching Old Matt's office thoroughly, he couldn't find the remaining screws. What he didn't know was that he had already been marked by Old Matt's men. Before he even had a chance to see their faces, he blacked out. When he came to, he found himself tied to a car. Clever as he was, he didn't make a sound and overheard a conversation between Jason and Old Matt. It turned out his son had already been summoned to Old Matt's house. Old Matt planned to send both Jimmy and his son to their deaths to console the spirit of his own deceased child. Knowing he couldn't wait any longer, Jimmy shoved his bound hands into Jason's head. The car immediately went out of control and crashed into a nearby tree, throwing Jimmy out. He struggled to free his hands from the tape, but by then Jason was approaching with a gun in hand. Seeing him, Jimmy immediately ran into the woods. Despite zigzagging to dodge, he was still shot in the thigh by Jason. Gritting his teeth against the pain, Jimmy stumbled into a small cabin where he found a sharp knife. Soon after, Jason entered with his gun. At a critical moment, he unexpectedly focused on examining his own wound in the mirror. Suddenly, Jimmy burst through, overpowering Jason. After demanding the location of his son, Jimmy drove the knife precisely into Jason's heart. Meanwhile, Harrison was innocently having dinner with Old Matt, unaware of the danger, but Old Matt could no longer suppress his murderous desire. Deciding he wouldn't wait for Jason any longer, he went to his room, changed into a thug's outfit, and confronted Harrison. Harrison was stunned, not expecting tonight to turn into a role-playing party. However, upon hearing Old Matt talk about a father's debts passed onto his son, Harrison finally realized the gravity of the situation, but he still couldn't believe his father's feud would make him shoot at him. Clinging to a desperate hope, he thought of begging for mercy, only to see Old Matt already lining up the scope. Old Matt ordered Harrison to run, warning that he would shoot when he counted to 10. Without hesitation, Harrison dashed into the darkness. A gunshot rang out, but he was unharmed. At the last moment, Jimmy had arrived in his car, ramming and sending Old Matt flying. Worried for his son's safety, Jimmy rushed over, and the father and son embraced, confirming they were both unharmed. Looking up, they saw that Old Matt had already fled into the distance. Back at home, Jimmy confessed to his son that he had a serious violent tendency, often unable to resist taking action against wrongdoers and punishing evildoers, which was why he had clashed with Old Matt. However, he never revealed the truth about having killed anyone. Harrison said he completely understood his father, and Old Matt seemed to have disappeared without a trace. Life for the father and son had returned to calm, but on Christmas Day, the missing Old Matt suddenly appeared, even bringing a gift for Harrison. Jimmy and his son knew this was a declaration of war, but with too many people around, they couldn't take action. A drone spotted several pipes in the snowy forest, and Jimmy immediately guessed they were ventilation shafts, indicating an underground structure below. He and his son rushed to the site and indeed discovered a passage. Just as they were about to go down, Harrison noticed a sensor wire, which he suspected was an intrusion alarm. Jimmy didn't bother avoiding it and stepped directly on it, intending to lure the enemy out. Meanwhile, the owner of the place, Old Matt, was at Jimny's doorstep pouring gasoline. After igniting it, he aimed his gun at the door, ready to shoot anyone who appeared. But after waiting in vain, a phone alert signaled the intrusion, and he realized his plan had failed with no chance of recovery. His immediate reaction was to flee. After Jimmy and his son entered the underground base, the first thing they saw was Old Matt's workstation for handling corpses, giving Jimmy a fleeting, almost unsettling sense of kinship. But what followed completely shocked them. Behind glass panels were the preserved bodies of beautiful young girls. Old Matt had grotesquely turned his victims into specimens, a truly horrifying sight. This ignited full-blown fury in both father and son. Jimmy could no longer suppress his bloodlust and directly told his son that he was the legendary Miami Butcher, implying that Old Matt had to die tonight. Harrison's reaction, however, was,
This motherfucker needs to die too.
With his son's approval, Jimmy felt deeply gratified. Without a word, the two of them went to Old Matt's house and coincidentally intercepted him as he was attempting to escape. Using his familiar techniques, Jimmy quickly subdued him and placed him on his own workstation. Fully geared up, Jimmy began his work, intending to pass his craft on to his son. However, the scene was far too gruesome for Harrison, who ran outside, vomiting uncontrollably. Afterwards, the father and son burned Old Matt's body completely to ashes. By dawn, they returned home to find their house already reduced to rubble. Angela approached and asked what had happened. Jimmy claimed he didn't know, saying he had taken his son out to watch the meteor shower the night before. After handling everything, Angela returned home to find an envelope tucked at her doorstep. Inside was a note stating that Jimmy had killed Matt, along with a titanium screw taken from Matt's body. Soon, Jimmy was arrested by the police, as they had found titanium screws in the ruins of his house. The codes on the screws indicated they were part of a set, and a quick check revealed they came from Matt's body. At the same time, they noticed that the recent crimes matched the methods of the Miami Butcher from years ago. Angela began to suspect that Jimmy himself was the infamous Bay Butcher. Helpless, Jimmy could only redirect her attention by bringing up Old Matt's case, which involved dozens of victims over a span of 25 years. Angela, naturally alarmed, immediately rushed to the underground base and instructed John to lock Jimmy up. Upon reaching the underground base, Angela broke down in tears at the sight of the human specimens displayed in the cabinets. Even with over 20 years of police experience, The horror was too much to bear. Meanwhile, Jimmy knew that stalling wouldn't solve anything, escape was key. He suddenly grabbed John and pinned him against an iron pipe. Since Jimmy and John had a good relationship, he didn't intend to kill him, only to force him to hand over the keys. Unexpectedly, John pulled a weapon to resist, and in the struggle, Jimmy twisted John's neck, killing him. Back at home, Jimmy urged his son to quickly pack and flee. Upon learning that his father had killed John, Harrison's expression instantly changed. He pleaded with Jimmy to turn himself in, insisting that John was a good man and that this was no longer punishing evil but murdering the innocent. But Jimmy couldn't agree. He planned to leave Harrison behind and escape alone. Harrison then picked up a weapon to stop him, but Jimmy didn't relent. In the next instant, gunshots echoed through the forest, and Jimmy collapsed in the snow, motionless. Would Harrison become the next Jimmy, or perhaps the next Dexter?